Welcome to the Espressif Developer Conference 2022. Today we are going to talk about ESP RainMaker. ESP RainMaker is a commercial cloud for your IoT products. Let's get started with the presentation. This is the overview. First, we'll go through the background and introduction. Then we'll talk about the features. Then we'll see what a commercial RainMaker deployment means. We'll also talk about the design principles that were considered while creating ESP RainMaker. And then we'll also talk about ESP RainMaker and Matter, which is a new protocol which was launched recently. So here's the background to understand why exactly was ESP RainMaker built. So Espressif has been in the business of IoT chips for a very long time, starting with ESP8266 and then moving on to ESP32. We have an SDK called ESP IDF, which focuses primarily on the firmware side, and it can help to realize typical IoT functionality on the device side. It includes the most common functionality like MQTT connectivity, Wi-Fi provisioning, HTTP server client, and related modules. Espressif has a very strong developer community who has been using this ESP IDF as well as the Arduino variants for this. But integrating the cloud services, phone apps, and other services like Alexa, Google Assistant, that has been a pain because our developer community is primarily well versed only with the firmware side. Most solutions available were either hard to use or expensive or half baked. So by half baked, I mean that people have some hard coded Wi-Fi credentials, then use some open source MQTT broker, and without having any access control, they just access the devices from their laptops or mobile phones, which is not that secure. So we felt that there is a need to fill in a gap and build a solution for developers as well as for commercial products, because most use cases are very common, and people keep on reinventing the wheel, and it sort of becomes a repetitive task because everyone has to do the same thing again and again. So with that background, we decided to build ESP RainMaker. Now let's see what ESP RainMaker is. It is an end-to-end platform that enables developers to realize their IoT ideas faster. It consists primarily of 4 pieces, which is the device SDK based on ESP IDF to build the firmware. Then there are the self-adapting phone apps with the sources available on GitHub. And the most important piece is the cloud middleware, which connects all of this together. And since most people interact with their devices via voice assistants like Alexa and Google, that is also provided as part of this solution. It works with all ESP32 variants, including the S2, C3, S3, and soon it would also work on the cheaper variant, which is the ESP32 C2. The public RainMaker can be used free of cost to evaluate, and even hobbyists can continue using it for ever, I can say, because we have a promise that we'll continue supporting it for a long time. And you can build a small ecosystem in your home or launch products with millions of devices. So this is a sort of a block diagram for ESP RainMaker. As you can see, there's the cloud piece in the middle. The ESP SoCs are talking with the cloud. Then there's the ESP RainMaker app and the external voice assistant integrations that we spoke about. So ESP RainMaker was built in such a way that the firmware developer, who is our target customer or target audience, I would say, he would have the most power because the phone apps and the cloud pieces are hard to understand. So we expect that the developer should not have to tinker around the cloud backend or the phone apps, and all the logic would be on the firmware side itself. So the cloud just acts as a tunnel between the devices and the phone apps, and all the logic is on the firmware. So people can define their products, their parameters and everything on the firmware side, and it would automatically reflect on the phone app. We have some standard devices, parameters, and services which have special handling in the phone app and even on the cloud backend. For example, if you are using the standard type as light, then it will show up as a light on Alexa and GVA. RainMaker is also available on Arduino because we understand that most developers prefer Arduino as their development platform. So we added the support in Arduino, but even then we recommend that you use ESP IDF because that is much more polished and has more features than our Arduino variant. Let's talk about the features of RainMaker. So RainMaker is not just a, even though it is a thin layer, and I mentioned that it is a tunnel between the devices and the phone app, it is not a simple cloud which just sends the data from here to there. It has most functions which are required for a typical smart home application. So let's just run through the list. There's user management, wherein you can just log in using your email address or third-party logins like Google, Apple, Facebook. The most important feature is device control and monitoring using a completely flexible device model. And the control can be done over local network as well as via cloud. The cloud would be the primary. But if you and the device are in the same network, the control can also happen over the local network itself. Then there are schedules to trigger actions at specified time. This is one of the most important feature because people want their devices to turn on and off at specified timings. Then there are scenes which are presets for parameter values for a set of devices. Then there are automations to trigger actions on some devices based on events on some other. Then there are push notifications, like if your device goes offline or something like a fire alarm triggers, then you would get a push notification on your phone app. Then there is device grouping to realize separation based on homes, rooms, device types, etc. We also offer a feature wherein you can share the devices or the complete home with the friends and family, so they also have the access to the same devices. Then there is time series data for use cases requiring history of data. Example is energy consumption. You can monitor the consumption over multiple days or multiple weeks, months, year. And there's a command response communication model to implement additional functionality. It is just part of the framework and it is very much flexible, and you can realize any use case you want with that. So these are not the only features we have. We also have administrative features. So you may have a small fleet of devices in your home or in your building, or it can also have hundreds of thousands of devices spread across the entire world. For all those cases, we offer these administrative features. The primary one being is the device management dashboard. So that is the main interface for accessing your devices as administrators. It would show the health of the system, like how many devices are online, how many are offline, how the devices are getting onboarded, how the users are getting onboarded. There are also mass manufacturing tools. Like once your development is done, when you have to manufacture a large fleet of devices, programming the private keys, certificates, firmware, and everything on them can be a tricky part. So we offer that as a service. Grouping can be done based on the node types, models, etc. You can have a group of lights, a group of switches, which can help you differentiate between the devices and also push OTA upgrades based on groups. So that is the next point we have here, like OTA firmware upgrades for individual nodes as well as group of nodes. Then there are statistics. As I mentioned earlier, we have graphs which show how the devices are getting onboarded, how users are getting onboarded, how users are mapping devices to their account, and so on. Then there is role-based access control. Like a single admin may not be sufficient for larger deployments. So you can assign multiple admins and each can have specified access control. Optionally, you can also have ESP insights, which gives in-depth picture of the health of the solution and provides tools to narrow down on problems. We'll talk more about ESP insights in a separate session. So the public RainMaker is very much suitable for evaluation purposes or for hobby cases. But if someone decides to take this to production and build commercial products with that, we have facility of that as well. So the commercial RainMaker deployment is like a replica of the public RainMaker, but deployed in your own AWS account. So these are the components that we provide as part of a commercial deployment. The primary thing is the cloud backend. It is provided as a serverless application repository in binary form. It would be installed directly in your account, and it can be extended using webhooks, custom APIs, and also reusing the existing database. Phone apps, as mentioned earlier, they are open source. We can help you customize the phone apps as per your standard themes, logos, and related things. And you can launch those phone apps directly in the Play Store with your own branding. And there are voice assistant integrations, like as I mentioned earlier, Rainmaker has integration with Alexa and GVA. Those are provided with your own branding and with support for your own device types. And Espressif also helps in the certification of the skills and the devices. So while building the Rainmaker, we considered various design principles to make this suitable for hobbyists as well as for commercial purposes. And the first and foremost point is manageability. We understand that our users are primarily firmware developers or device manufacturers, and they may not be well versed with managing cloud services. So we use serverless architecture to reduce DevOps and to facilitate deployment and management in an easy way. The second part is scalability. So while launching a product, people may start with pilot runs with say a few hundred or thousands of devices, and as the product becomes popular, the volume would go on increasing. Since we are using serverless, the scaling happens automatically. You do not have to do any special DevOps to increase the capacity of the cloud backend. The cost is the next important factor. Um, since we are using serverless, it is more like a pay as you go pricing. If the device count is low, the messaging is low, you won't be charged much. As the count goes on increasing, the cost will go on increasing. But AWS has this good thing, like if the volume is very high, the per device cost goes on reducing. So that is very much useful. Security is one of the most important aspect. Even though this was started as something for hobbyists, we have kept in mind that we follow security best practices so that this can easily be used for commercial products, because that is where we wanted to finally reach. And I think we have reached there already, because we have many customers who are using Rainmaker. We don't use any custom security scheme and unnecessary privilege escalation. We use all standard security mechanism like X509 based mutual authentication, uh, then access token and refresh token based access for the end users, etc. Extensibility is the next point. We have tried to add most features that are typically required for an IoT system, but obviously we can't meet all the requirements of all the users. So we have kept this Rainmaker very much extensible. We have already seen the benefits of serverless, but let me go through them once again. Uh, we are using all the AWS serverless components to build Rainmaker. As mentioned earlier, it can be deployed in your own AWS account. It is designed for scalability, security, reliability, and cost. Minimal DevOps and almost no maintenance required, and pay-as-you-go pricing. So we have gone through all these points, so I won't spend much time here. Let's talk about the privacy and security consideration once again. Since ESP Rainmaker is deployed in your own AWS account, Espressif does not have any access to it. The access is restricted only to you and your administrators. That we feel is one of the most important feature, because these days people are much more aware of the privacy and security considerations, and they don't want their data to fall in hands of others. So that is why we have built Rainmaker in such a way that only you have access to it. We use all standard AWS security and access control mechanisms, which were already mentioned. But to talk about it, it's the device communicate with the cloud using certificate-based mutual authentication. The admin access is restricted using the standard AWS IAM policies. End users log in through AWS Cognito. And we also have WAF, which is a firewall to prevent attacks on the cloud backend. Espressif routinely conducts penetration testing using third-party labs, so that it is ensured that it's not that we feel that the system is secure. We ensure that it is indeed very secure, and that the third-party labs help us ensure that we follow all the best practices. And a few months back, we also did a complete GDPR review. Whatever suggestions we got have been implemented. So if you plan to launch your products in the European market, even that is possible because all the GDPR certification has been managed already. So we spoke about extensibility. I'll just go through the points how to understand how RainMaker is extensible. So we have very flexible data model. Even though the standard examples are for light bulb, switch, fan, etc., you can create any device or parameter as per your requirement. Like you can build air conditioners, you can build garage door openers, and any other device type that you feel like. Complex use cases wherein the interface is not directly visible to end user can also be realized using what we call as RainMaker services. If you have used RainMaker already, you will see that there are features like scheduling scenes. These are implemented using RainMaker services. So you don't see it on the device control page, but it is handled specially on the phone apps. The most interesting part of this is it does not require any change on the cloud backend. It is completely between the device and the phone apps. So you can extend it easily because the firmware is in your control and the phone apps adapt automatically. If you are well versed with the cloud services, then there are other ways in which RainMaker can be extended. First is webhooks. It can be used for propagating RainMaker events to external systems. OAuth 2 connectors, if you have any existing identity management system, it can be linked to RainMaker so that people would not have to create new accounts and they can continue to use their existing usernames and passwords. And then you can build custom APIs. Since RainMaker would be deployed in your own AWS account, you can reuse the database, you can add new APIs, write custom lambdas, so that any functionality which is not already covered by RainMaker can also be achieved. This is something new. I'm not sure how many of you have heard about it, but Matter is a new royalty-free connectivity standard to increase compatibility among small-term products with security as a fundamental design tenet. So people who have already worked on IoT products may be aware that to make your device work with various ecosystems like Apple, Amazon, Google, you have to explicitly add support. Like for Apple, you have to implement HomeKit. For Alexa, you have to implement the Alexa skill. For Google, you have to implement the Google Actions. With Matter, all of this becomes very simple because it is a common protocol for all. Espressif has been an early member of this, and we already have solutions for Matter available on GitHub. Let's talk about how RainMaker plays an important role in this Matter protocol. So RainMaker will provide integrated device management for Matter, including secure module manufacturing, which is one of the most important pieces. Like we have seen in the earlier line, security is a fundamental design tenet of Matter, and it also includes securely programming the private keys and certificates on devices. And Espressif offers services to make this easy for you. The RainMaker dashboard, the administrative features I mentioned, can be used for managing your Matter fleet, which also includes OTA firmware upgrades. So you can create groups and push firmware upgrades only to those, as we had mentioned earlier. And you can also monitor the health of your Matter devices. So Matter is a protocol which works only on the local network. With RainMaker, you can give a remote control facility. So whenever your phone is on the local network, it would use Matter for talking to your devices. But when you are outside the network, the control can happen through RainMaker. So RainMaker helps in completing the system and making the device accessible even if you are not at home. And ESP RainMaker will also help realize a complete Matter ecosystem, which is built on top of Matter's concept called fabrics. Now, fabrics could be a bit hard term to understand because there is a lot of theory behind it, but it would be covered in a separate session so that you will have a better understanding how RainMaker can play an important role in Matter ecosystems. So that is all we had for this. Let me just summarize. So ESP RainMaker is a free-to-use, feature-rich, secure cloud service and works on any ESP32 variants. Our development boards are easily available. As I mentioned, the source code is easily available. So you can just get started right away. and build your IoT system. Whatever links you would require or the documents you require can be found on these links that you are currently seeing on the screen. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Okay, perfect. So the next talk is over, and let's invite the speaker, Piyush. Okay, Piyush, can you hear me? Give me a second. You need to unmute yourself. You are muted. Yeah?
Hi everyone,
Perfect.
can you
We
hear
have
me?
you here. Perfect. So the stage is yours. You can start with some of the questions you have sorted out during the talk.
Yes, so I have answered some of the questions on the chat directly, but I'll repeat some of them in case people have missed that. So one of the first questions was, is RainMaker optionally self-hosted in the cloud or strictly through Espressif hosted solution? So as mentioned there, the public RainMaker can be used by hobbyists and even for others for evaluation. But once you are ready for the launching it commercially, you can get your own private deployment and it would be deployed in your own AWS account. Next question, is there any documentation beyond the intro website? So that is more like a single point where we add all the documentation. If there is something missing, you can always raise issues either on the forum or GitHub issues, and we can answer there and also improve the documentation if someone feels that there are some things which are missing or need to be improved. Another question is, do you provide support for RainMaker with Matter? So you must have seen we had the Matter and RainMaker sessions back to back, and in this session I also mentioned about our work on the RainMaker plus Matter front. We also have a working example already, and it would be released in a few days so that everyone can try it out. Another common question is, do we have support for custom Alexa GBS skills? So the current RainMaker public Alexa and GBS skills support some standard device types like light bulbs, outlets, fans, switches. And as we get new customer requests, we go on adding those device types also. And if you get a private deployment, then you can completely rebrand the skill as per your expectations. Like it would have your own logo, own name, custom help text, and all that. That is provided as part of the commercial RainMaker deployment. Another common question is, how do we opt for the commercial deployment of RainMaker? So all such queries can be sent to sales@espressif.com. You can mention that you require a commercial RainMaker deployment, and they would provide you the appropriate information and also the pricing models. Uh, so people also want to know if RainMaker would be supported on ESP32 C2. So C2 has lesser RAM, but we can still fit RainMaker into it, and we have everything working, including the normal remote control, OTA upgrades, local control, as well as Matter. Everything working on the C2. So examples for that also would be released in a few weeks. Then someone had asked if RainMaker can be deployed in Azure or Google Cloud. So as of now, RainMaker is tightly coupled with AWS serverless architecture. So at least in the near term, we would support only AWS. If later we get more requests for Azure or GCC, we can consider those requests as well.
If you don't mind, Piyush, I have sorted one of the questions also from the chat, so I will ping it, highlight it. It's some like more beginners one. So when I just want to start developing the RainMaker application, what I need? Can you answer this one, please?
Yes, so the RainMaker public deployment is free to use for all. So you can just head over to rainmaker.espressif.com. The docs there have the getting started section. You don't really need to have your own AWS account because RainMaker does the hosting for you for hobbyists as well as for initial evaluation. And there's no concept of a local server in RainMaker because RainMaker is primarily a cloud service. And local communication I mentioned is something which is just from the phone app to the device, with RainMaker backend not being in the picture. But the gist is you don't need your own AWS server. You can just use the public RainMaker.
Okay, perfect.
Which is free to use.
Thanks. You can continue with like some of the others you have started. Thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe I can have one more. There were like a lot of questions about the Alexa. So do you have the support for the custom like Alexa or GVA, something like that? Can you answer this one, please?
So we support the smart home skill of Alexa and GVA. So we don't support custom skills, but whatever is supported by the smart home skills of Alexa and GVA, we would support that. So as of today, we don't support all the device types. As I mentioned, we support only the few like light, switch, fan, and those. But if anyone has any special request, we can definitely add that. And that's about it.
Okay, and I have the last one probably. It's highlighted. So it's about the documentation and APIs. If you can answer this one as well, please.
Yes, so the question was about historical data. So there is this new feature called time series, and it is actually enabled by default for the applications like temperature sensor. And if someone is using RainMaker, they would know that when you create a parameter, you need to pass a few properties to it, like read, write, persist. Similarly, there is a property called time series. If you just add that property to a parameter, automatically it would start reflecting in the time series data, and it would start showing up on the phone app.
Okay,
So we'll also
perfect.
ensure that these things are not missed out in the documentation. So if there's any confusion, we'll definitely update the documentation.
Okay, perfect. So I think you just answered a bunch of questions. If there are still like some more, you can continue answering in the chat. And I think we can move on the next talk, which is going to be the FreeRTOS in ESP IDF by Darian. Thanks a lot, Piyush, for answering. And let's jump to the next one. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you.